Join us as we get up close and personal with rocks on the next Before Us.
One of the most common questions we get in our line of work is, how do you find archaeological sites? It's a simple question with a complicated answer. In some cases, the sites that archaeologists study have always been known. In other cases, the sites are found by accident, like during construction projects. But for many of us, it's all about the landscape. When I began the P5 project 10 years ago, which was just after getting my PhD, I was attracted to the area, not because I knew that there were amazing archaeological records that were preserved there. It was because I found the landscape so compelling. In fact, when I was just starting to learn about Pondoland, I found an online blog from someone who had taken an airplane trip all along that coastline. From those photographs, I could see that the vegetation was incredibly diverse, with dense tropical scarp forests in the deep river valleys, woody thickets in shallower valleys, coastal forests along the current shoreline, and grasslands on ancient raised marine terraces. And I knew that each of these vegetation types offered their own unique set of plant and animal resources to support people today and possibly in the past. There were also numerous freshwater rivers and, of course, lots of waterfalls. But there was also the geology, which may not be an obvious incentive. Yay, rocks! But it's actually super important. Along a small section of the Pondoland coast, I could see that there were these really dense and hard rocks that had created towering coastal cliffs and deep incisions inland along the rivers. In fact, in one of the pictures, I could even see what looked like a very large rock shelter in one of the cliffs next to a waterfall right at the ocean. Sound familiar? It's the site that we've been working at, and the reason that caves and rock shelters like Waterfall Bluff are so important is because these places often protect and preserve the most fragile records about past people and the worlds that they lived in, giving us a very detailed understanding about the past. After seeing those pictures, I knew that I had to see Pondoland for myself, and so I arranged for my first visit out to the area. Soon after, I organized our first field expedition in 2011, where myself and 3 graduate students spent 6 weeks hiking up and down the coastline, recording over 24 rock shelter and open-air archaeological site, and an archaeological record that went back hundreds of thousands of years. That expedition kick-started P5, and 2 of the people who joined me have since become co-directors of our project, Dr. Justin Pargeter and Dr. Hayley Cawthra. Hayley is now the chief scientist for marine geology at South Africa's Council for Geoscience, and she also coordinates all P5 geological research, both onshore and offshore. So, who better to tell us about Pondoland's landscape and how it fits into our study of such an amazing region?
Hayley, hey, how are you doing?
Hi, Eric. Nice to see you here.
Hayley, you know, it's so great to be here with you. And of course, you are one of the founding members of P5. You've been with us since the very beginning. And now, of course, you are one of our co-directors, and you are leading all of our geosciences for the project, and you're coordinating all of that. And so today, what I wanted to talk to you was specifically about the geology. And let's start big, why we are out there in Pondoland, and then I'd like to really focus down onto Waterfall Bluff and the implications of the geology to the people that actually lived there in the past. So can you explain first, why that area geologically is so important to our research.
Many years ago, working down on the Cape South coast, I remember a conversation. We were sketching on a whiteboard. We were like, this shelf here is so wide and there are these big gaps in the record. Where in South Africa would we be able to look for a place that doesn't have that? And we looked at maps and we spoke and we looked at rocks and geology, and we kind of narrowed down the idea of Pondoland, because in Pondoland you've got hard rocks at the coast, which is not always the situation in South Africa. You have an extremely narrow continental shelf carved by geological processes. And you have a pretty interesting climate environment regime, which is very different to where most of the work in South Africa in the Middle Stone Age, the later Stone Age has been done. So Pondoland's geology, it extends back 400 million years. So the oldest rocks in the area are called the Msikaba Formation, and these are where Waterfall Bluff is. These are about 400 million years old, and they were laid down in an ancient ocean and ancient rivers that no longer exist. These are flat-lying beds. They've never been folded or tilted. They've never been too modified by subsequent processes. The next oldest rocks in the area are about 183 million years old. These appeared from a massive eruption of a volcano that created the topography of the Drakensberg. If you looked at a map of South Africa from Pondoland towards the west, going inland, the Lesotho highlands are relatively young geologically and extremely hard rock. That kind of drops down onto these planed terraces. Sometimes it's punctuated by little hard intrusions of dolerites, dikes, and sills. These are associated with the volcanic rock that you have in the Drakensberg and Lesotho. So the volcanic extrusion, the big violent eruption, that produces basalt. But at the same time, as this volcanic plug is pushing through, the volcanic material moves through cracks in the crust and it solidifies more slowly, and that forms dolerite, which is the same composition as basalt, but texturally it's a little bit different. So punctuated across the landscape, you have these dolerite dikes, which are vertical, or sills, which are horizontal features.
We actually see these kinds of features near Waterfall Bluff, don't we?
Yeah, right below Waterfall Bluff, there's a horizontal dolerite sill. It's probably also been responsible for pushing that landscape up a little bit as it intruded into that crack, forced it open. Eventually, by about 135 million years ago, the supercontinents of Gondwana managed to start to break apart. And for the first time, the Indian Ocean came into existence. When this happened, the Falklands Islands pulled apart from the area adjacent to Pondoland and moved off to the southwest. The continental shelf was cut, sediments eroded from the interior and ended up being deposited onto this newly formed seafloor to leave behind rocks and sediments that are remnants of that time that dinosaurs were roaming near. Following all of this, the landscape kind of set itself to what we know now. We've had fluctuations of sea level, and beaches and dunes have shifted across the landscape. Today, the beaches and dunes are still pretty mobile in that area. Sediments are blown around from place to place and transported in different ways. And often, sediments make their way into archaeological sites. They get preserved into sort of a layer cake style stratigraphy, and we're able to go out there and study them.
So, Hayley, I'd like to now talk to you about what we're seeing when we're at Waterfall Bluff and we're looking at the archaeology. Even during these glacial periods, the people that were living at Waterfall Bluff were still collecting marine fish. They're still collecting shellfish and also species of wood and other resources that were found right along the coastline. So we know that they were able to access that coastline. We've talked a lot about the region. What I'd like to get now is your impression of what that area would have looked like when the coastlines would have been a little bit further out and that now submerged coastal plain when it would have been exposed.
Well, this is a pretty cool question and something interesting to think about. In the geosciences and also in the paleosciences in general, we have a lot of ability to be quite creative, not in a way that's embellishing details, in fact, but we have really unique opportunities to create much larger landscapes from tiny fragments of information. So we have these windows of frozen time preserved in places like archaeological sites that give us a glimpse into something that gives a much bigger idea of something broader. So sea level around the world is not static. There's this constant shift between being cool and having low sea level because the water that's on the surface of the earth is held up in the ice caps. And then periods when the ice caps melt, sea level rises, like now, and sea levels are high, continental shelves are submerged. And the continental shelf actually connected to the land. Those are two parts of one landscape, with the relative exposure or drowning being dependent completely on relative sea level at any given time. So in our work, we're always trying to imagine dropping sea level by at least 130 meters to expose that continental shelf that's actually a terrestrial landscape and therefore a terrestrial ecosystem. And it's very much part of what we're studying now on the modern coast. Why we're so excited about Pondoland is it's got an extremely narrow continental shelf adjacent to the current coast. Normally, it's considered that about a 10-kilometer foraging radius is doable for a hunter-gatherer. And in this case, the entire foraging radius is possible to achieve by walking out onto the continental shelf, what was then a landscape, and back to the cave within a day. And this is really interesting for us because most archaeological deposits that would have been on what is now the continental shelf, we expect that a lot of them would have been pretty destroyed and eroded by rising sea levels. Because rising sea levels here came with waves moving their way up the landscape. And waves are extremely destructive, high energy things. What's so unique about Pondoland is that there's an opportunity to find evidence of that time when glacials were a thing, when the earth was in an ice age, and in South Africa the sea level was low. People living in the caves that are now along the coast, even when sea level was low, would have been able to exploit that landscape and come back home to the cave that now contains all of these deposits.
What's really neat to think about is that no matter what time in the past, 6,000 years ago, 11,000 years ago, or 300,000 years ago, anyone that was on the coastline today at any one of those sites that we are now working at would have always been able to easily access the coastline. It was always a continuous coastal occupation. And I don't know of any other place like that across Africa where we find anything near to that.
No, I agree. It's absolutely incredible, and it's been a real treasure trove for us, and it's absolutely surprising that it hasn't been explored by other scientists in the last several decades.
Now that's good for us.
Yeah, exactly. But it was super exciting to go out there, and we weren't sure what to expect, and to document many, many, many previously undescribed sites was absolutely, I think, a once in a lifetime, a real age of discovery for the P5 project.
Well, that original survey was actually one of my favorite field seasons, and just being able to walk around the corner and you never knew what you're going to find, a black mamba or a big, beautiful rock shelter, and we found all of that stuff.
Yeah, we absolutely did. And beach cows and lovely local people, and we made new friends, and it was amazing.
Wow, Hayley, this has been a fantastic conversation. And I really enjoy the time that you took to talk to us about the geology in Pondoland. I mean, I thought I knew a lot about it beforehand, but I learned so much new stuff. Thank you so much for giving us this brief introduction to the landscape around Pondoland. And I really look forward to chatting with you in the future about more of the different topics about our geoscience research there in Pondoland.
Thanks, Eric. No, this has been awesome. It's been fantastic to talk to you and to talk about the geology. And with the beautiful imagery that you've taken over the years, I think anyone watching this can go for a walk across that landscape, take a virtual tour of that landscape, and really experience and feel it. It's super ancient, it's super interesting, and it's really beautiful. So enjoy.
Well, you take it easy. and we'll chat later. Sound good?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Cheers, Eric. Nice to see you.
Cheers, Hayley. Bye-bye.
Bye.